Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm Doug Lawrence, Chair of the Warrant Committee. I'm a little hoarse, so I will try to speak loudly into the microphone. I want to thank everybody for coming out on this cold, late January night. As you all know, this is the open hearing in lieu of the February 8th town meeting regarding 3 articles relating to the Minuteman Regional School District. As with all open hearings, the Warrant Committee will not issue a recommendation this evening. Rather, we are here to listen to the presentations, and then there will be a question and answer session following the presentations. So with that said, I would like to just make some brief remarks about Minuteman and the warrant that is before the committee tonight, and hopefully to help clarify some of the issues and some of the questions that have been floating around. Okay. Minuteman, of course, is a vocational technical school. It offers courses in everything ranging from culinary arts and cosmetology to engineering, robotics, and biotechnology. The Minuteman Regional School District is comprised of 16 member towns. Dover has been one of those 16 member towns since 1973, and I am informed that Dover has always had at least one student attend Minuteman. The first article that we are addressing tonight is whether to adopt a proposed amended agreement. And in order to make a decision about that, it's important to understand a bit what is in the current existing agreement. That agreement has been in effect since 1973. I believe it's been amended once or twice, perhaps in the early 80s. But it has not been amended all that much since the Minuteman Regional School District was formed. Under the existing agreement, most decisions by the town require unanimous approval. In other words, it makes it very difficult to accomplish anything. Each of the 16 member towns effectively has veto power, making it, in my opinion, something akin to the UN Security Council. Minuteman and the member towns have been working for years, long before I joined Warrant Committee, to amend this agreement. As you can imagine, it's been very difficult to get all of the member towns to agree because a town like Dover or a town like Weston has very divergent interests than a town like Arlington. In 2014, we came close to reaching an agreement with all 16 member towns. Some towns voted for it, some towns voted against it, and as you may recall at last year's town meeting, Dover tabled it. This year in 2015, all the selectmen from all 16 member towns got together and worked very hard to put an agreement in place that each of the towns could live with. They met for hours and literally went around the table, I am told, and hammered out this agreement, with each town saying whether they could live with this provision, what they couldn't live, what they were okay about. And the result is the amended agreement that is before us tonight. I'd like to highlight some key provisions of the proposed amended agreement, and they are as follows. Regarding operating costs, it's now going to be based on a 4-year rolling average rather than the recent year's enrollment share. Capital costs are the same way, again, with a 4-year rolling average with a 1-student minimum, however. So if there's 0 students attending 1 year during that 4-year period, Dover will be assessed as if we had 1 student attending. And then again, that's rather than having 5 students enrolled for the previous year. Non-member towns that send their students to Minuteman under the proposed agreement will pay a capital fee in addition to tuition. Currently, non-member towns that do send their students merely pay tuition and other operating costs and do not pay a capital fee, which works to their benefit and perhaps against the member towns. Under the new agreement, there's a certain number of towns, 7 I believe, that can withdraw from the regional school district without penalty. Currently, under the existing agreement, a member town could not withdraw from the Minuteman Regional School District unless it was approved by all 16 member towns. One other change is that the school committee will use a proportional voting system rather than a one vote per town system that it has used in the past. Those are some of the highlights of the amended agreement. I know Ford is going to get into this a little bit deeper, I believe, but I would like to just start us off with this high-level overview. So Article 1 is whether or not the town of Dover will vote to accept the amended agreement. In order for the amended agreement to go into effect, all 16 towns must vote in favor of it being approved. If a single town votes against the amended agreement, then we remain under the current existing agreement, which requires unanimous approval and has impeded Minuteman's progress in the past, and perhaps also makes it more difficult for Dover to do things that it would like to do. Moving on to Article 2 is, in the event that the proposed amended agreement is passed, as I alluded to, there's a provision that would allow Dover to withdraw from the Minuteman Regional School District without penalty. This is a one-time opportunity for Dover to withdraw if it so chooses. If it does not exercise its right at this time, then I believe there's another provision that governs, and I think there's a 3-year notice period or something to that effect. Excuse me. So just briefly, if Dover withdraws, then it will not have to pay the annual minimum required contribution, the operating assessment, and the capital assessment. Nor will it have to pay its share of debt, including any debt for the $144.9 million MSBA-supported new school facility that will be built and completed sometime around fiscal year 2020. But however, if Dover does send students to Minuteman as an out-of-district town, it will have to pay tuition, a capital fee, which is estimated at $8,000 right now, transportation costs, and sped costs, if any. So to sum up, if Dover votes to withdraw, it's certainly some immediate costs may come off the table. However, if Dover does send one student or more to Minuteman, then it will have to pay all of those other costs that I alluded to, including capital contributions. And that is part of what makes this article so difficult in particular, because we just cannot predict the future and what the needs will be 3 fiscal years out. In addition, Dover does not have an obligation to make vocational technical access available to its students. However, if a student opts for a vocational technical education, as a student has an absolute right to do under Massachusetts general laws, then Dover must pay for the costs of that vocational technical education. So there had been some discussion about whether Dover needed to reserve space somehow or make vocational technical education available to students. It does not have to do so using those terms. However, if a student wants to go to a vocational technical education school, the student applies and is accepted. Dover must bear those costs. If Article 2 passes and Dover withdraws from the district, then and only then will Article 3 become relevant. And the purpose of Article 3 is to determine whether Dover should endeavor to enter into an intergovernmental agreement or intermunicipal agreement with Minuteman or any other vocational technical school district. The purpose of the IMA, the intermunicipal agreement, would be to guarantee space for Dover students who do seek vocational technical education. We have absolutely no idea what the terms of that agreement would look like, and there are no guarantees that any school district would be willing to enter into such an agreement. So again, in summary, Article 1 is whether we approve the amended agreement rather than the 1973 existing agreement, rather than remain in the 1973 existing agreement. Under Article 2, whether the town withdraws from the school district or whether it continues to remain in district. And then and only then, under Article 3, if the town does withdraw, whether to attempt to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with a vocational technical school such as Minuteman or some other school. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Ford, if you're ready. And we are, as I said at the beginning, we're saving questions until the end in the interest of time. I'll be available for questions, and other members in the audience will be as well as the Warrant Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. Doug learns well. You've got a lot of information. You did a very good job. The only thing I do want to correct, just to make a point, when you're dealing with the operating budget and the capital budget, you need 11 of the 16 towns to approve it, because it's not an amendment to the agreement. Anything that's an amendment to the agreement needs unanimous. I first want to introduce Kevin Mahoney. Kevin, if you could stand. Kevin is the Assistant Superintendent of Finance at Minuteman, and he is here to answer questions, number one, that I cannot answer, but number two, he knows the finances probably better than I do. So Kevin is with us, and I think you'll find him very helpful if you need him. And I'm going to read my presentation. I find that is smoother. It's pretty much going to be in line with what Doug says. We did not talk ahead of time to review what each of us said, so there is some repetition, but I think it's all pretty much in line. I am Ford Spalding, Dover's representative to the Minuteman School Committee, and I live at 5 Hutton Road, and I've served in the Dover Warrant Committee, Board of Selectmen, Regional School Committee, and I was also co-chair of the Dover-Sherburne Regional School Building Project. And I really want to thank you all for being here this evening. It's important that you're here, and as I've said to many of you, please, we want to hear, if you could bring 25 of your best friends to the February 8th meeting, that would be very, very important. I'm going to provide a little bit of background, which is going to add a little bit to what Doug said. Minuteman is Dover's career and technical vocational high school. Dover has been a member of the 16-member district since 1973. The district goes from Dover to the south, Carlisle to the north, Arlington to the east, and Lancaster to the west. In addition, historically, students also come from non-district members, and they are Waltham, Woburn, Watertown, Cambridge, Boston, Wellesley, Peabody, and others. For the past 10 years, about 65% of the students that attend a Minuteman are in-district students, and about 35% are out-of-district students. The number of students at Minuteman has ranged from approximately over 900 students to the current 673 students. Minuteman is 2 schools in one. It provides a general academic education similar to what you have at Dover-Sherburne. The curriculum ranges from foreign languages. We provide 3, Latin is included, math, English, history, sciences, and other courses. It has no-cut sports program and other extracurricular activities. Most notable is the Vocational, State, and National Skills USA competition, in which Minuteman excels. Like DS, Minuteman students must also pass the MCAS exams, and 100% of our students do pass it by the time they graduate, which is interesting because we have a very large portion of students sent to us from the district who are in special education programs. We also provide an array of advanced placement course opportunities. Minuteman offers an extensive number of career and technical courses. A Minuteman student, in order to graduate, must be certified in the course of their choice. Thus, a Minuteman student must pass the academic courses, the career and technical courses, and the MCAS exams in order to graduate. The curriculum options are, in part, automotive technology, biotechnology, construction trades, culinary, cosmetology, engineering, robotics, horticulture and landscaping, health occupations, and many others. And over the next 4 years, we will be adding advanced manufacturing and multimedia engineering. Approximately 65% of our graduates go to college. About 33% go into their professions, and the remainder into the military. Colleges and employers like Minuteman students because they arrive with a purpose in mind. They know why they're going to where they're going, a passion for their interests, and skills to be productive. Minuteman has always been under 1% of our Article 4 Dover budget. My assumption is that will not change even under the new building project. This May at our annual town meeting, we will be voting to fund our part of a $144.9 million building project to replace our 1972 current building in partnership with the Mass School Building Authority, MSBA. Dover's payment over 30 years will be approximately 2% of the total cost of the school. The MSBA will pick up a little over 32% of the total costs. However, we are receiving 44.75% of the eligible costs. That's remarkable because we really have a base cost of 40%. We were grandfathered because if a new school goes in now, it's going to be 31%. So we've gone really from 31% to 44.75%. For Dover, this will mean an increase in our Article 4 Minuteman budget. Bill, if you want to just show the next slide. This is the FY 217 budget that's coming to the town meeting under Article 4 this year at the town meeting in May. Dover's total cost based on 2 students will be $69,862. Cost per student, $34,931. Then we're going to move this out to FY 220. Building is approved. It's going to be occupied hopefully in September of 2020, and that's when Dover is going to have to start paying its share. If we send 2 students, which we currently have 2 students at Minuteman, the total cost will be $118,654, or $59,000 per student. If we, in our 16-member district, if Dover sends 4 students, that number goes from 59 to 41,657. Because some towns are considering leaving the district, we just are showing this projection. If there were 10 members in the district, and you can see the numbers, the cost per student would be 60 if we send 2 students and 43 if we send 4. This brings me to Article 1. Approve or reject the amended regional agreement. Because of a building project which has universally been acknowledged throughout the district as needed, and the knowledge that capital costs will increase for all in the district, Minuteman members needed to look at the regional agreement. There were 2 previous efforts to do this over the last 6 years. Neither received the 100% approval as required for an amending the regional agreement. Just a few months ago, 16 selectmen from our 16-member towns decided to try for a 3rd time. Deadlines are very good with governments. They tend to react very well. They merged the ideas presented over the past 6 years and added and changed some of their own consensus ideas. The end result is that they reached unanimous agreement on the document we are asking you to vote for on February 8th. The Minuteman School Committee also voted to endorse the amended regional agreement without a dissenting vote. I know that it's amazing to get the 16 members of the school committee to agree on anything, and that they did on this one. And here's what it does for Dover. As Doug said, it changes the annual student enrollment for operating budget purposes to a 4-year rolling average. It changes the capital budget formula from a minimum of 5 to 1, which is going to, believe it or not, lower the cost of capital for Dover. Allows for an easier pathway for an existing member to leave the district. A majority authorization will allow you to do that. Also under, as Doug said, a limited period of time, members can leave and will not be responsible for any debt incurred by the district in December 2015. It's December 2015. Number 4, non-member sending communities out of district who send students, assuming there is room for those students in the school, will be paying a capital fee on an MSBA. It has to be an MSBA-approved project. Currently, they are not permitted to pay that fee. This will further reduce Dover's costs. A negative is a 1 vote per member school committee will be changed to proportional voting based on member enrollment. I've always been opposed to proportional voting. Believe it or not, we even talked about that at the region at one point. It's not a good idea, but in this case, in order to get to yes, we had to do that. In the last 7 years since I've been on the school committee in Minuteman, proportional voting wouldn't have changed 1 vote. In fact, Dover and Arlington have always voted the same. The amended agreement is seen as more attractive for towns and cities that may be considering joining the district, and there are several that we're in discussion with. If this happens, this will spread out the fixed costs and lower the costs for existing members. In order for the agreement to become effective, we need you to agree to yes. We need 100% of the 16 members to agree to vote yes, and I urge you to do so. If you stay, that will help Dover financially in the long run, because it is in Dover's. Because it is in Dover's best interest, I recommend that you do vote yes. Do you want me to go on to Article 2, Doug, to talk about that?
I think, yes, we appreciate that, Ford.
Article 2 is, should we stay or should we go? I'm sort of reminded, that reminds me of a song that goes way back to the 60s, but instead of we, it's I, right? Dover, under Mass General Law, Chapter 74, is required to provide access to their students to a vocational education, if that is the student's choice. Dover-Sherburne Schools does not offer that opportunity, nor should they, because the cost would be prohibitive. Since 1973, Dover has made that option available to its students by its members in the 16 membership in the 16-member Minuteman Regional District. And for the past 15 years, Dover has spent 30 students to Minuteman. If Dover withdraws from Minuteman, the Chapter 74 obligation, in my opinion, is still really there for its students. The process for withdrawal is you need a majority of the vote of the town meeting to approve that action in conformity with the Minuteman Regional Agreement. And this really comes from the regulations. The role of the Department of Education then will be to work with the towns, quote, to address the various financial and logistical issues that arise from withdrawal. So that's dealing with withdrawal. This includes the obligation to provide or arrange for appropriate vocational education opportunities for their students. That's a direct quote from the regulations. The reality is Dover should help our students find spaces at Chapter 74 approved vocational schools. Right now, there are few spaces available, and in some cases, no spaces available. Also, under the recent DESE regulations, vocational schools are required to accept and place in programs in-district students over out-of-district students. Out-of-district students are going to have to wait in line to see if there are any spaces left over for them. A number of us who are affiliated with Minuteman feel that the new 628 student capacity school will be filled by 2021 or 22. We feel that's because of the new facility, the new building, potential towns that will be coming into the district will help us meet that expectation. In my opinion, there will be no guarantees for district students if a town leaves the district to get admitted into any Chapter 74 school. What about the costs? With a new $144.9 million capital project, a Minuteman education will not be inexpensive. In fact, it will be expensive. In fact, it will probably be more expensive than vocational schools in the area. One reason is that we're going to have a brand new building, unlike any of the other district schools in the area. As a non-district member, Dover will pay the out-of-district costs for vocational schools. In 2020, Bill, the next slide shows that the tuition set for out-of-district students by the Commissioner of Education. $17,556 is what we think it will be in 2020. Then there are transportation costs for students, $13,759. Then there's a capital fee, it would be $8,000. And if a student, Dover typically sends SPED students, it'll be another $4,500. So the per student cost we're estimating in 2020 will be $43,815. So let's go back to the next illustration, which really shows what you've seen before, and all we've done is we've put in Dover as an out-of-district town. This is what we're estimating the per student cost will be. If we send only 2 students, which has been our average for the last 15 years, it's going to be less expensive to be an out-of-district student, out-of-district community. If we send 4 or more, it's going to be more advantageous for us to be in the district. Finally, you also need to consider Minuteman's curriculum. Cost is something that a lot of towns like to talk about, and we hear that in the district. But we're talking about education of our students, our kids. Minuteman's, so when you're looking at other places a student might go, you need to look at that curriculum. Minuteman works with industry companies in Route 128, 495 belt. That's really the companies that we're looking at. We work to understand their hiring needs and what they do. Minuteman fits very well in that area. As mentioned earlier, we offer Chapter 74 approved curriculums like advanced manufacturing and multimedia engineering, biotechnology, robotics, engineering, environmental science, and horticultural programs. Those programs aren't offered in schools in this area. For the most part, as I said, those programs aren't offered. So let me go to the next slide, Bill, which is pros and cons, in our opinion. Dover remains in the district, Dover leaves the district. Students from Dover have priority access to a Minuteman education. That's not only access to the school itself, but access to the specific programs that they're interested in. Dover leaves uncertain access to any vocational technical education. Dover has a seat in the school committee. Dover would have no voice on governance of any school that they would go to. Dover has a vote on the operating budget. No vote if you're out of the district. Dover has a vote in the capital budget. No vote if you're not in the district. Dover's costs are stabilized and known. Dover has no future control over costs. Students from Dover would have strong educational opportunities. We don't know what those opportunities are elsewhere. So my recommendation is that the Minuteman you know is better than the unknowns of leaving the district. So I'm asking you to vote to continue to stay in the district. In closing, I'd like to show a 5-minute video, if I might, Doug. which is currently on Dover cable television. It really it follows 4 graduates and exemplifies the outcomes of a Minuteman education. The film was interestingly done by a Dover Sherburne student, Andrew Much, did this film for us. So if we could show that, Bill, that'd be great.
My name is Ed Cotton, and I'm the executive chef here at Soto 13 in New York City.
My name is Kathy Moncheville, and I am the head stylist at Salon Hair.
My name is Jason Crottle. I own and operate J. Crottle Corporation, a landscape construction business in Massachusetts.
My name is Erin Meister, and I work for the Cellular Therapeutics and Transplantation Laboratory at Mass General Hospital. We give people a second chance at life. We work with the doctors and nurse practitioners in assisting stem cell transplants. So when patients come in with certain disease states that require transplant, we'll get the cell source and dose it in a way that fits the prescription of the doctor. It is life-changing what we do here, and I just feel so grateful to be a part of that.
I never stop thinking about food. I'm always constantly buying books, reading books, going out for dinner. You're putting out the food as fast as you can, and you look out into the dining room and you see a bunch of people enjoying themselves, smiles on their face. That's what really gets me going each day.
I basically do hair, makeup, and wardrobe, and I can also do facials, manicures, pedicures, and waxing. I love making people look and feel at their best. Usually when people come into the salon, they don't really feel at their best until they feel like they look their part. I love making a difference in their personal self-esteem.
The best part of my job is seeing the finished product. When you actually build something, you construct something with your hands, and you can see the before and the after, there's a great deal of satisfaction.
Minuteman prepared me in starting my own business with every aspect, down to customer service, people skills, financing, thinking of names and demographic. They gave us the confidence that we needed to be able to step into any job and to believe in ourselves enough to be able to know that we could handle it.
Minuteman helped me prepare to start my own business by exposing me to what horticulture and landscape is, whether it be turf management, landscape construction, greenhouse management, or even agriculture where it's taking down and caring for trees. Minuteman enabled me to see all of those different areas and choose what I wanted to do when I graduated. And most high school settings that we've never seen that. They have a bakery open to the public, a restaurant open to the public. You're in the back of the house, you're in the front of the house. It gave us a taste of what it was going to be like after we entered the real world.
All the equipment they have, they really do have what mimics what you find in even my freshman year of college, I was doing things that I had been exposed to in high school. I didn't realize at the time how unique that was as a high school program.
At 14 years old, I had a big portfolio book, and I was able to get any job right off the bat because, first of all, this kid has a whole book of her work, and second of all, she's not scared. Why? Because we had those mock trainings in our classroom, and we had our teacher always prepping us and letting us know, what will get you the job, what will make you stand apart. You have to be able to be a distinguished individual in this industry. There are many stylists born, and many barbers born, but what makes you different? Our teachers made sure that we knew what that was and made sure that we capitalized on every chance to show the world what we could do.
I don't know if there's any other 15 or 16-year-old who walk up to an instructor and say, hey, I want to make consomme. How do you make consomme? Well, we set up a time this week and stay after, and we'll make consomme. They cared. They could see the fire in my eye, and they knew that I wanted to learn more.
Going to Minuteman kind of encouraged me to be a little bit more proactive about what I want to do in my future. They kind of gave me a safety net in deciding what I wanted to do because I didn't know if I wanted to do biotech or environmental. So having that 4 years, I was able to kind of do both without spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, declaring a major in college and then finding out 1 to 2 years into it that it wasn't for me.
I would say to somebody entering the program, don't limit yourself just to the vocation that you pick. Give everything a chance.
You can never have too many mentors. You know, ask questions, ask what they like, ask what they don't like. Finding something you don't like is equally as important as finding a passion.
Experience all the different shops and opportunities at Minuteman, because later on in life, you're going to be glad you did.
Doug, that completes my presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Ford.
You want copies of that? It's DCTV is showing it currently now. I know you have, and Doug really would like questions when we're done. I think the selectman may want to say something, but it's on DCTV. And if you send me an email, I'll send it to you. It's also on the Minuteman website, www.minuteman.org. There are a couple of films up there, and that's one of them.
Thank you, Ford. At this point, I would like to open the floor up to questions. I'd like to make everybody aware that Kevin Mahoney, the Assistant Superintendent of Finance for the Minuteman Regional School District, is in attendance here tonight, and he can help assist with answering any questions. And in addition, as Ford just alluded to, the Board of Selectmen are also present. If you have a question, if you could kindly approach the microphone, state your name and your address, and ask your question. We greatly appreciate it. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Do the selectmen have questions, he said first?
We do not, thank you. We've been involved in this for a while, so we don't know.
I would not have forgotten the selectmen's presentation, trust me. I appreciate the concern.
I'm Gerald Clark, Valley Road, retired member of the faculty at MIT and Boston University. I'd like to point out that there was an excellent and I thought reasonably balanced article in yesterday's Boston Globe, the Globe West section, if people haven't seen it. It pointed out several statistics that are very relevant, and that goes to what Mr. Spaulding talked about in terms of there being 7 towns that are considering or eligible to withdraw, having a total of 57 students, or less than 10% of the student body. The remaining member towns, 9 of them, have 339 students. The surprising statistic is that there are 5 major municipalities plus an unnumbered additional number of municipalities who have 277 students, or not 35%, but actually 41% of the enrollment. And if you look at then the total enrollment, which is some 673 as of this publication, it's my understanding that one of the issues with the physical plant of the current facility, which has been deemed to be unsuitable and perhaps, as I understood it, unsafe in some cases, was indeed the enrollment being as large as it is. I'm not asking questions, I'm just putting matters before, and I don't think anything I'm going to say here is going to result in an answer tonight. Rather, I'm suggesting these are questions and matters that the Warrant Committee, as to financial issues, which is all that the Warrant Committee has purview over, are going to have to consider. The Dover School Committee, which I understand has purview over the involvement of Dover in the Minuteman, clearly has the questions that may arise as to education. There is that split. So that said, I just read this. I would gather that the end result of a decision to remain within the Minuteman district, or alternatively to withdraw, would be based on which alternative offered the best in these criteria: the opportunity to offer equal or better vocational education to Dover students, the opportunity to deliver that education at the lowest cost for equal level of education. And looking to the future, the availability of consistent opportunity for such education for students in the next 10 to 20 years, which is the relevant time period for this agreement. Regarding past enrollments and costs, and projected, going back as far as 2004 or 2006, it would appear that from year to year up to today, Dover enrollment has ranged from a low of 1 student to a maximum of 3. The fiscal year 2016 budget provided in its budget for 3 enrollments. The cost per student of late has run between $30,300 to as much as $37,800, according to the Blue Book. The current year per student costs are projected to be, in the Pink Book, $34,931. So you can see the range of costs here and the comparison to the prices that we've seen. Projected per student costs, if Dover withdraws, are expected to be the $43,815, which is 25% higher than this year's budget amount. If Dover remains in district, costs are projected to run between $41,657 and $60,458, representing a maximum increase of 73%. Over the last year, the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners here in Boston, as of the end of 2015, actually showed a decrease, not an increase. That is to say, a reduction, not inflation. And for the year prior, as everyone who's on Social Security knows, there was a 0 cost of living adjustment. The Pink Book financial papers, which everyone has received and which were represented in the slides, the relevant columns of B and C. Column B of the 2 unnumbered pages is based on assuming that the current 16 towns remain in the district, which the Boston Globe would suggest is unlikely. Column C for both pages assumes that 6 out of 7 towns considering withdrawing do so withdraw, which seems to me rather unlikely also. There are significant differences between the first and second pages, and this is based on the first page projecting a Dover enrollment of 2 students, which, as Mr. Spalding has said, is the arithmetic average in the 15 years past. The second page projects an enrollment of 4 students, which the Blue Book record suggests has never actually occurred, at least not over the last 15 years. Again, reference is made to the history of a maximum of 3 and a typical enrollment of 2. That said, relevant to the transportation costs, which are one of the few areas that's somewhat controllable, please explain the 67% increase shown for in-district costs if enrollment is 4 and not 2, given that presumably most expense incurred over the fixed cost of simply providing the transportation is mileage and relates to travel from Dover to Lexington. If non-member out of district, then how are the transportation costs identical whether it's 2 students or 4 students? That cost of $13,759 is the same whether it's 2 or 4 students, according to the Pink Book. In any case, that's either 670% more than our current costs or 800% more than our current costs. I will mention some possible reason for this in a moment. The special education costs. It wasn't clear to me, and I think it does have to be made clear, but I think it was alluded to in Mr. Spalding's presentation. Chapter 766, or Public Law 105-17, the 2 relevant pieces of law for special education. The non-member costs are shown as $4,500 per student. Are those same costs buried into the in-district costs and therefore not additional if we remain in district? Is an enrollment projection of 4 reasonable? Based on history, that's a question. And if not, are the costs per student for 3 to be estimated by taking the average of the 2 and 4 student enrollment numbers in the Pink Book? Has there been a statistical study done using some number of relevant factors such as housing starts, street list census, other like factors, to produce a statistical estimate of future enrollment for the next 3, 5, and 10 years? Is it reasonable to assume that 6 out of the 7 towns will withdraw? What if only 1 or 2? Currently, according to the Boston Globe, well, I mentioned the 41%. But the real question there of this article is what happens if some of these non-member towns choose to alter their arrangement? The current enrollment, well, we talked about the issue of the stated capacity. What happens if the municipalities that are non-members conclude that the costs are too high and no longer enroll? 41% of the current enrollment is non-member. What happens if Boston or one of the other large towns or municipalities decides not to participate? The same fixed costs are going to have to spread. The other side, of course, is the issue of withdrawal. Withdrawal requires finding an alternative placement, which Mr. Spalding has well stated. If Dover withdraws, how available will enrollment really be? Will education be of the same and equal quality elsewhere? The problem then becomes, once a student is enrolled in a school, the presumption is the student will complete all years of study in that same school. Assuming that's correct, what happens to the student, the next student in the next year? If year-to-year enrollment at the same school is not available for the next cohort of students that Dover presents, what happens? Do you end up having student A going to Minuteman, student B going to Keefe, and possibly with 3 students, a third school? That may be the basis for these projections of transportation costs of 800% increase. I'm not sure. Assuming there is a reasonable risk of such scattered enrollment picture, what happens if 2 students are from the same family and are forced into 2 separate schools? Finally, all that said, and it's not on your page, and I apologize for it, I didn't realize it didn't get printed. All that said, the elephant in the room is the projection provided by Representative Denise Garlick that within some 20 years, which is, again, a relevant time period, Dover's population will tip to being at or more than 50% elderly.
Mr. Spalding, would you like to address any of those comments?
I think, Kevin, we can...
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
I'm going to turn over to Kevin, and we'll see how good his notes are.
Again, I wasn't looking for answers.
No, I think, Jerry, I think you should get some, because I think some of your points were excellent. I think some of your questions are excellent. And I think some of your statements may need some clarification. So let's give it a try.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Clark, for your comments. I think there were some things that that I was able to take out of your comments that I thought I could at least offer some background on. One of the things we talked about was special education. You asked specifically about the charge of $4,500 for out-of-district students that they're charged, and how is that considered for the member towns? The fact is that it is included as a member, that special education cost is included in the actual assessment, and as an out-of-district student, it's billed separately. That $4,500 is based on an analysis of our actual services that we deliver, and so we allocate that on a per pupil basis. It's also important to note that over the last 5 years, Minuteman's population of special education students has been anywhere from 44 to 50%. It's currently 46% right now. When we talk about cost drivers, we certainly consider the delivery of services that we provide to special education in the area of special education. On average, statewide, the when the state develops its Chapter 70 state aid formula, it considers 4.75% of the students are special education eligible, whereas 46 out of 100 of our students are special education eligible. And when you look at the cost to educate those students, statewide, it's about $25,000 special education in-district services. So I think that's a consideration that may need to be factored in when looking at the average cost per student. I think the other thing, too, when you look at the cost per student, is there was a change in the assessment formula for capital. As was previously mentioned, it was based on the current year enrollment with a minimum of 5 students. So when Dover was assessed for debt and capital with 2 and 3 students, it would bump up to 5. So that would be a bit of a cost driver when looking at the per pupil cost. There's been a change that takes into consideration 3 elements of the to develop the capital formula. 50% of it based on enrollment, actual enrollment with a minimum of 1. Then there's about 34% that's attributed to combined effort. What that is, it's a measurement of wealth based upon community income and property value. And then the remaining 16% represents 1% of that year's debt service allocated to all member towns. Sort of the capital contribution, the annual dues to the, to ownership. And so when you're looking at Arlington, who sends 120 students, that 1% spread out over 120 students is not a big impact on per pupil cost. Well, it certainly is for Dover when you're sending 2 students. So that's sort of a fixed cost. And that again is driving some of the per pupil cost. When we're looking at the analysis projecting 2020 versus the cost today, we need to consider that the increase that we're looking at factors in the debt service associated with the new building. Right now, we're assessing around $1 million, $500,000 of which is on an ESCO annual lease obligation that we're paying over 15 years. The other $500,000 of it is for ongoing repairs and stabilization fund to the existing building. So I think when we're looking at the cost where we are today versus where we expect to be, what's in that cost is the cost of the full debt that we expect for the new building. Talk about transportation costs. It's a good question. Why is transportation costs for out-of-district students so high? Well, as a regional vocational school, we receive 60% reimbursement from the state for what our transportation costs are. I think the state does offer reimbursement for vocational technical transportation for those students that are non-residents. But in the past, it hasn't been particularly high. I can't quote what it is this year yet, but in years past, it's been about 10 or 12%. So what we're looking at as an in-member versus non-member needs to be factored in that there is a transportation reimbursement that's passed on. So I think that the other consideration also, and it was mentioned by Mr. Clark as well, if you're non-affiliated with a vocational technical school and is a student that chooses to go to Minuteman and a student that chooses to go to Keefe or Tri-County, transportation costs for those students need to be incurred. You can't necessarily say, all right, both you students are going to go to Minuteman. So you may be, in effect, doubling your transportation cost as well. So I think that and then when we talk about enrollment, we have looked at where the numbers are now, students that are in our school districts right now. And again, I'm looking at this from the total, not necessarily how it impacts Dover or others. But what we're seeing is we're seeing births now, students that are working their way up through the system, and we're seeing increases. Some of our largest sending towns, Arlington, Belmont, Concord to some extent, are seeing some large student enrollment growth working their way through the system. That may not apply to Dover, but we're certainly seeing it in some of our larger communities. We factored that into our enrollment projections. We have a design enrollment that we're hoping on this Wednesday we will receive approval from MSBA to proceed to local to the next phase, which is gaining local approval in all of our towns. But that target enrollment is based on a 628 student enrollment. Well, we're there now. We just got to change the shift from more in-district versus out-of-district. We recognize that, and some of our recruiting efforts are starting to reflect that. We're seeing our applications for this year significantly higher than they were this time last year. And we have ourselves on a 4-year plan to try and get to, at the time the building opens, 524 in-district students, with the remaining 104 seats available for non-member towns. We submitted that information to the MSBA. The MSBA reviewed it, and as part of their decision-making process earlier on in the process, sent us a letter saying that they would not consider participating in a school building project for any enrollment less than 600 students. So I think when we talked about the enrollment, we did have to submit some information to MSBA that they needed to consider as part of their approval process. So I think just some of the takeaway. Those are some of the comments I just wanted to offer, given some of the questions raised by Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney. Yes, sir, would you like to come up to the mic?
Thanks, Bob. The old building will be torn down. Within our budget, we will just have to fix the land. We have as an ad alternate athletic field, like a stadium field like we have at Dover Sherburne. It does not fit into our current budget, so it's an ad alternate. The MSBA, remember there was a difference. They're going to give us 44.75% on eligible costs. The real cost is 32%. There are a lot of things that the MSBA will not pay for, or they will only pay up to a certain amount. One is anything to do with removal of the land. If you're taking care of the land, building athletic fields and all that, there's a certain percentage they'll give you. Because of the amount of work we have to do just on the Lincoln side of the campus to build a new building, it's going to use it up. It's much better to put the building on the Lincoln side of the campus, and you're going to hear more about this in May, than keep it in the existing spot, because we're not going to have to pay for alternative places to provide education.
Other questions? Yes, sir, in the back.
Dave Haviland, 88 Walpole Street. I hope they're very quick. First, can a non-member town join?
David, the answer is yes. If a non-member town wants to join, they can try to do that. Now, they have to do it through an amendment process. So they're amending the regional agreement to come in, but the answer is yes. To date, communities that have had some interest have shown no interest. And the no interest is because the 16-member towns are what I would call dysfunctional. They don't all get along, and part of that is due to the regional agreement. The regional agreement's a problem. That's why we're trying to fix the regional agreement. The second reason is they want a new building. They take a look at our outdated building, and I want to correct one statement that was made. The building is safe because we make it safe for the students, but from an educational point of view, it needs to be updated. So the answer is yes. I can tell you a couple of communities, which I'm not going to tell you who they are, have become far more interested in joining, but they want to wait for the process to see, one, will the regional agreement be changed, and two, is there going to be a new building? But both of these communities are substantial They're actually cities.
Thank you. Kind of a follow-up. So you talk about spots not being guaranteed. So if Dover did decide to withdraw and there were 2 students that we wanted to send, and Waltham, who's also currently a non-member town, if I remember that, read that article, and they want to send 60. How does it work? I mean, why does one town get to send 60 students and perhaps a small town only not be able to send 1 or 2?
The way it currently works right now is we have the capacity to be able to accommodate that. One of the things that we're looking at, if there's a need to go into intergovernmental agreements, and this still needs to be worked out, is the mechanics of how those agreements would be negotiated. For example, the agreement needs to be negotiated between the Minuteman Regional School Committee and the sending district school committee. To the extent that we see some potential future enrollment growth, that may cause the Minuteman School Committee to maybe want to limit the term of the intergovernmental agreement in order to be able to accommodate the member towns. And there may be some discussion about the number of seats that could be allocated. That could be all part of the intergovernmental agreement, but those are some of the things that would need to be worked on moving forward. If I could just sort of circle back to your other question about why member town can towns join. I think one of the hesitations about cities and towns thinking of joining under the current agreement is the inability to get out of it. The need for 16 towns to let you out is not very attractive when we're trying to encourage towns to come in. So the revised regional agreement before you allows the majority of towns in the district to vote to allow you to leave.
I just also want to add, and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, the Department of Education has also said that you must provide for in-district students first. And to the extent there's room, then you'll be able to bring in out-of-district students. You mentioned Waltham. Waltham, I guess I would say, maybe unfortunately or fortunately, depending on where you sit, the MSBA is allowing them to build a Chapter 74 program and building space in their school system. So Waltham probably will not be a large player in the Minuteman district. There are a couple of other communities, I said, that are not doing that.
So that would imply that there would be more room for a small town like Dover with 2 students if Waltham takes perhaps a majority of those 60.
I guess I would answer another way. If in-district students occupied 628 spaces, there'd be no room for out-of-district students.
Okay. And then the last one is a favor, Ford. I work with numbers every day, but when you're switching back from 2 students to 4 students in your presentation, you lost me on some of the math. So I think it would be helpful, especially since we haven't sent 4 students ever to Minuteman, to stick with 2 and to use all the examples with 2.
Thank you. When Ford and I were working on the numbers, that came up quite a bit, and we understand that. I think what we were trying to do is reflect some of the projections that we were anticipating based upon where we see the enrollment at fiscal year 20. When we're looking at some of the larger towns, we've been trying to be consistent in our presentations for all 16 towns to try and reflect the anticipated enrollment growth. But I appreciate your comments.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Some other questions from the audience, sir?
Dave Stapleton, Valley Road.
Quick question, since everything seems to be revolving around costs, not education, but costs. My question is, are there any gates in place or contingencies in place to keep the $144 million in 2020? Because nothing, taxes and expenses never go down, they always go up.
As I mentioned before, I am very optimistic that MSBA will vote to approve our project scope and budget to be $144,944,000. Yes, change. That is our number. We will stay within that number. To the extent that as unforeseen costs or any changes in the building project arises, that means that we will be reducing the scope of the work, but the budget will remain the same. We're trying to take some steps in the construction process, trying to go with a construction manager at risk. This process allows us to do early bid packages to try and lock in some of the prices on steel and some of our windows and some of the things we have to do early on in the process. The construction manager takes on a portion of the risk. So I think there's more of a partnership between the district and the construction manager. But the bottom line to your question is, we have a budget, we will not exceed it.
Other questions? I know we, sir, would you like to come on up? Oh.
We want you on television, Chuck. Yeah.
I did enough of that on
MIT. I wanted to clarify. I wasn't suggesting that the school is currently unsafe, but it was at one point, and that was a consideration. The issue of the 2 and 4 students, I think that's been beaten to death. It's clear that that needs to be clarified. The issue of the SPED was because it isn't inherently clear in your pink book that it's included in the in-district. You don't actually state that. So I think that needs to be clarified. There's one other thing that always comes up with school building costs in this town that's not in the pink book, and that is, I'd suggest you also publish what your expectation of the bonding costs are going to be, and a projection of what you think when you go to bond, what your interest rate you're using. Someone's going to ask that question.
We will do that at the May town meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, I know we have one up here.
I think this may have been addressed in some of your follow-up remarks, Kevin, but the numbers that you've shown on the table for the 2020 estimates, there are assumptions built in there, but what is the assumption with regard to enrollment and percentage of that enrollment that will be in district? I'm assuming that you're using the 628 number, the capacity number for the enrollment, which is actually less than the current enrollment.
That's correct.
How about what are the assumptions for what percentage of that 628 starting in 2020? And Ford, you said the school is optimistic that as time passes, it will become a 100% in district, but I don't think there's any vocational schools in the state that are there now, but that certainly could be the case, especially if it's a brand new, terrific facility. But what is it for those numbers that you showed us? Are you using the 65-35, or you're assuming a much higher percentage of in-district, or what numbers you?
Yeah, what we took a look at is what we're seeing in terms of our in-district growth of total student population. It's awful difficult to try and assign, doing a forecast, how many students you're going to get from each individual town. So it's quite frankly a pro rata sort of allocation based upon a growth rate that we were looking at somewhere around 6 to 8%, and then we tried to make some adjustments based upon what we saw with some individual situations, most notably Arlington. So I think that was the basis for the enrollment projection. What we've also taken into consideration is that with some of the new, more recent vocational schools that have been renovated, we're seeing now that those schools have waiting lists, and so we are seeing some of that appeal to a new building project, not relying totally on that, but recognizing that it does exist. I'd like to point out also, just as recently as last Tuesday, as part of the governor's State of the Commonwealth, he did address vocational technical education as a means to try and close that skills gap that exists out there. We are part of workforce development. He had a follow-up meeting Friday at the Federal Reserve Bank and committed about $83.5 million for vocational technical education and equipment grants. So, and when we look at the Commonwealth, the total waiting list in the Commonwealth is over 3,000 students. So we do think that there's some demand here that supports our projections, and MSBA, as part of their review process, also has signed on to that as well.
Also, John, I want to make sure that I understood your question. Of the 628, we're projecting that 105 students would be out-of-district students in September of 2020. I don't know if that was part of it.
And just one other follow-up, unrelated, but well, to the table. I think there's a little confusion, at least in my mind, and maybe in a lot of people's minds, as to what it's meant by being in district. You get preference, but there aren't actually any guaranteed slots. Let's say we go to 100% in district. Well, or let me ask you how you deal with waiting lists, how a school, there's actually an application process. This is not like DS where by law we take any student and must be accommodated, and if need be, we add teachers and so on. But if you get, today, or if you get up to 100% in district, well, what happens when that 629th in district student applies? There is an application process, right? And how do you sort of deal with that?
You're absolutely right. As part of our admissions policy, we talked a little bit earlier, Ford alluded to it earlier, that in-district students do have a preference over out-of-district students. But the admissions process is very similar. It's based on 5 criteria, most notably grades, attendance, behavior, recommendations from the sending guidance counselor, and then an on-site interview at Minuteman. And then based upon that 5 criteria, the student's ranked, and if they hit a certain percentage, they'll be accepted. That would be how it would, the process would remain the same even if we had 100% 628 from member towns. If we get 750 applications, it would be based upon the admissions policy. And to the extent that we fill our programs, that student would then go on a waiting list with an opportunity maybe to come back at the mid-year or maybe the following year.
One of the criticisms we receive from some communities is, you didn't accept our students. And that's the reason why there is an admission process, but that goes on.
I guess as a follow-up, have you, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but I think that's kind of in the job description a little bit, but being on the Warrant Committee, have you turned down applicants from in-district towns?
The answer is yes. The answer is yes. I can't tell you what communities, nor could Kevin tell you what communities.
I'm getting to the point that even if you're in district and commit to a certain
if they don't meet
potential fixed cost, it's not a guarantee that Dover has slots. But of course, our Dover kids,
Well, I think,
they'd all get in.
John, the answer is you're right.
I was just trying to clarify because there's some confusion.
The answer is you're right. The other thing that's very interesting is Minuteman cannot ask, nor does the sending district tell them whether a student is on IEPs, special ed students or not. That's not a question that's permitted.
Right. And I noticed perhaps a little bit of misunderstanding. Jerry had asked about, well, gosh, a family could send 2 children or 3 children to 3 different schools. Well, yes, but I think part of it, though, there's a misunderstanding. This is driven by the families. Even if we're a member of Minuteman, a Dover family, well, we have, I think we still have a student at Norfolk Aggie.
We have two students in Norfolk
Two
Aggie.
students. So actually, it's not driven by the town. The town of Boston doesn't say, well, we're not going to participate anymore. They don't have a right to do that because families can apply. I mean, that's part of your right as a...
What I was saying was, hypothetically, you could have one family with two students in different grades, and the family desires that both go to the school, and you then have
yes,
this issue arose.
yes, yes, yep, yep.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the audience, the Warrant Committee, the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Spalding or Mr. Mahoney? Yes, sir, in the back. Please come on up.
I didn't know you were permitted to ask questions.
This is just a point of information. Jim Rapetti, 14 Old Meadow Road. With respect to the town meeting in Springford, could you give us a little bit of a preview of what the warrant article will look like with respect to funding the school building? You can tell why I'm asking that question.
I certainly can't give you the wording. We will be going to all, and Kevin is going to jump in, but we're going to be going to all the communities that are in the district and asking them to help bond $144.9 million. There will be a presentation of the building, and we do not need 100% of the communities to say yes, correct? Well, Kevin, do you explain it?
The warrant article will in fact have the entire amount of the $144,900,000 listed as the amount seeking authorization with reduced by the MSBA grant of 44.75% of eligible costs. We will be presenting, as Ford said, we will be presenting a financial model in addition to the renderings of the design of the building in order to reflect what the cost impact and the tax rate impact would be on each community by project. Does that answer your question?
Okay, well, it looks like there are no further questions. I would like to thank on behalf of the Warrant Committee, the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Spalding and Mr. Mahoney and everybody else, all of you for coming out tonight. As you might imagine, getting a quorum on February 8th, 2 nights from tonight, is an absolute necessity and arguably our biggest hurdle with this special town meeting. So please encourage all of your friends to come out. We'll try to keep it as short and sweet as possible, and we will get things taken care of. Thank you so much, and good night.